Welcome. Tech session number 31. We are going to be getting into hardware and network troubleshooting. So during this one, we're going to be identifying some common hardware network issues that users experience on a day-to-day basis. We're going to be talking about like drive failures, or getting into printers a little bit, display devices, a few different things. Talk about some common problems and generally where you would want to start in your troubleshooting and solution process. So, being that I am tired, let's see here. Jose, can you read for us, please, sir?
Sure. You might hear a lot of noise in the background though, because they're working on the next door unit.
No worries.
Computers are complicated and troubleshooting can be hard. You already know that, but give yourself some attitude in troubleshooting because it's not always easy. Prepare yourself with a solid foundation of knowledge and never be afraid to consult other resources, such as internet or coworkers. Situations will arise to make even the most experienced technicians shake their heads in frustration. Sometimes you'll hear people say things like it just takes practice and experience to become good at troubleshooting. Those words are of little comfort to someone who is relatively new and facing a challenging problem. Yes, experience does help, but even newer technicians can be effective troubleshooters if they understand the fundamentals and follow a logical process.
Thank you. So, yeah, the first few times you come across these problems, they're going to be frustrating, they're going to be difficult, they're going to be aggravating. And if it's a rare problem that you don't see very often, you're going to sit there and rack your brain. Oh my gosh, I've seen this before. How did I fix it? And just remind yourself regularly, you're not on an island. You have resources at your disposal, and there's a variety of them. No one person is the end all be all pinnacle of knowledge of all things IT. It just doesn't exist. There's too much out there to know. There's too much nuance. Too much has changed, especially in a short period of time. Not yet. So we need to have a good process to build into it and be more efficient at finding solutions for problems that we come across on a regular basis. We talked about this before. We had the 6 steps for troubleshooting, all well and good. But we also need to remember our layers of knowledge base. So we have our internal toolkit that, what we know, what we use, what we deal with all day. And these are problems that we can address, solve very quickly. We've seen them a dozen times. Oh yeah, this is super familiar. Here's what I got to do. After that, we have our organization's body of knowledge. The ticketing system that they use also works as a research tool for us to be able to solve common problems, or maybe even rare problems, but are unique to our company or industry. After that, we step out to the internet. We start hitting forums. We start hitting Google, YouTube, Reddit, a variety of other forums that we can get our hands on. You'll find some are more reliable than others, and those will be your first go-tos. A few minutes go by, whatever, we're unable to find any information there. Okay, next, step out to our coworkers, because we've exhausted our personal resources that we have access to. Maybe one of our coworkers has seen something like this, so we consult with our coworkers, see what they have in their toolkit and what they may be able to find, or maybe they have a different understanding of what the issue is, which may affect our search results and stuff like that. We tap that well, it's gone. We move on to the next layer, which is then stepping it up to our supervisor and or escalation to the next tier. So a lot of this has to happen relatively quickly. We have to be able to triage and then effectively elevate tickets in an efficient manner. But this is our general process. And we want to try to stick to a specific process over and over and over again. Because something like I tell my son all the time, first, be concerned with doing it correctly or doing it right. And then the next time you see it, you know how to do it right, you can work on doing it faster. And then the next time you see it, you become a little bit faster. So speed develops over time, but first we need to be concerned with correct order of operations. All right. So some basic categories of common issues we're going to be getting into. First, storage devices. Then we're going to get into displays and video systems. The all favorite printers, although some of this will be a review from what we did yesterday and what we did this morning. And then finally, wired and wireless networks. And we'll also get into a little bit more command line, which I know is a fan favorite, just above cables and connectors. So we brought the commands, don't worry. All right. So first, hard drives. They tend to come from one of three areas. Usually it's a bad connection, the disk itself is failing, or the adapter and disk are connected incorrectly. So we check these things. Before we start cracking the case and checking to see if we have bad cables and stuff like that, first we want to see if it's just an intermittent issue or if it's a more catastrophic issue. So first and last one, the interface is bad or the adapters aren't connecting. It's easy because the drive absolutely does not work at all. So if it doesn't work at all, either it's not connected or there's something wrong with the connection or the drive has completely just gone kaput. Happens. Middle one is going to be a little bit harder to diagnose or understand because it's going to be more intermittent. And we're probably going to need to run our check disk command and see and scan the drive to see if we have any bad sectors. Or we can use the smart system here, which we'll get into in a minute, self-monitoring. So other issues with hard drives, but we'll get into smart here in a minute. Other issues with the hard drives, you may hear loud clicking and scratching noises. This is typically only in mechanical drives, and it's usually because something is touching that platter and either scraping it or grinding on it, something along those lines. And this is usually caused by a physical malfunction in the drive itself. This is the case. You want to back up this drive as quickly as possible before you have catastrophic failure and then replace the drive. So if you ever hear that grinding noise one time, you'll never forget it. So that's the sound of all your data going away. All right. Slow performance or read-write failures. So failing hard drives might exhibit these. They also can be a symptom of a drive being too full. When we start getting over 80%, drives start to slow down because they don't have as much space to read or write to. It's harder to fit larger programs. Stuff tends to get a little bit scattered, especially on mechanical drives. And our ability to use those leftover portions of the drive for our page or swap file become less and less and less and less. So it starts to slow the system down. So firstly, we need to double check just to make sure how much of the drive we're using. If we're about 85, 90%, it's time to consider getting a bigger hard drive. We're talking mechanical drives. They tend not to be that expensive. Older computers will likely have like 250 to 500 gigabyte hard drives. More modern ones will be 1 terabyte plus. So maybe going and doing a clean disk and getting rid of some of your cache files, duplicate files and stuff like that might buy you some time, might get rid of some space, but a new drive tends to be on the horizon for you. If you run the check disk and you have a large portion of bad sectors, probably time to back up the drive. Like if you're only using about 40, 50%, back up the drive and replace the drive because the drive is working towards failure. Boot problems. These come up quite often. These can be something as simple as the hard drive not being recognized in the BIOS. This can happen if you install a new hard drive, a cable could have gotten knocked loose, and that's the one that has your operating system. Your boot order could be out of whack. So you tell it to look for, you know, an operating system in the optical drive, then the USB, then hard drive 1, and then maybe go out to the internet. And you've done some work on your computer and you put the operating system on hard drive 2 just because it was a faster solid state versus the mechanical drive in bay 1. Well, problem being, now we look at our boot order and it's not in the mix. So the BIOS tells us where to go look for these things. We need to confirm that where the operating system is on the list for us to go look for stuff. Could be a bad sector in your boot records. And we would go into the Windows recovery environment for this, go into the command line. And I'm going to go ahead and type this command in chat because this one actually came up on my exam. And this was the command that I could not, for the life of me, remember when sitting there for the test.
Was it an open-ended question? We had to write the command, or like what's it?
Do what? Your audio is breaking up.
Was it multiple choice for this command, or like?
This was a performance-based question where I actually had to go in and do all of this stuff. So this was a simulation, and I skipped this question and then came back to it at the end. I had about 10 minutes left over at the end. And I put in over 50 commands and I could just not for the life of me remember the fix MBR. So boot recovery, fix master boot record. That's all it was a bad boot sector. You know, the other version of it's down at the bottom of the page. So here's the boot rec fix MBR to fix the master boot record. And there's the boot rec fix boot to fix boot sector issues. So depending on the errors you're getting, these commands will come up. And you would have to go into the Windows recovery environment to execute these. And they have a command line option from it. Because we're not able to boot into the operating system, so we can't do it from the main one, right? So we got to go into the Windows recovery environment to be able to get to the command line to actually run these commands. So boot rec / fix boot and boot rec / fix MBR. Write them down, put asterisks next to them, highlight them, put them on your pillow. This may or may not show up on a performance-based question. Did you have this one, Ray? No? Okay. All right. Smart. I love this. Self-monitoring analysis and reporting technology allows us to scan hard drives, and it can give us a warning about an imminent failure of a drive. So it is typically used at manufacturers, but also runs kind of in the background in a lot of Windows systems. And if you receive a smart error, you should take it seriously because it is likely one of your hard drives is about to fail. It doesn't mean that it will give you a warning every time because it's looking for specific indicators, but it can let you know that you have a potential for a drive failure. It looks for essentially 70 metrics, monitors those particular items, and when it starts to see them get out of whack, it's going to let you know that there's a possibility of your drive failing in the very near future. in which case I hope you have a backup or create one extremely soon, like next time you turn your computer on. Because has anybody here lost an entire hard drive, like lost everything? Have you ever had that happen? Yeah, I have. It happens once.
Yeah,
Yeah, it happens to you one time and you become extremely paranoid about it from that point forward. Ironically, when I was going through the program, I had my main drive fail 2 days after we talked about drives in class. Thankfully, I maintained backups at that time because I'd already gone through a major data loss about 10 years prior to that. So if you don't have a backup or any kind of data backup for yourself, please start considering it for your own sanity. And so you don't look back on this conversation and go, man, I wish I'd listened to that crazy teacher of mine. So, but smart diagnostics can let you know that there's a potential failure coming for your drive. Again, predominantly used by manufacturers for quality control, but still can be relevant running in the background, but not always going to tell you. RAID arrays keep coming back up. Dealing with one disk can be frustrating. Dealing with many has its own set of challenges. You have more disks, you have a higher chance or higher percentage probability of having at least one disk failure, which is why RAID 0 is even more risky than just having a singular drive. So, the two types of RAID arrays we usually deal with, we have our software and our hardware version, right? Now, let's look at this one. If the RAID array isn't found, stops working, try to narrow down the issue. Do you have a singular drive that has failed? If you have an external one, it's likely going to give you an indicator or something that, Bay 3 has failed. Software version on your computer may not tell you that. So depending on the type of RAID array you have, you would approach these issues a little bit differently. For RAID 0, if one of your drives failed, what's the general prognosis? RAID 0. What happens if we lose a drive?
Oh, you're done.
Lose everything.
Lose everything. So RAID 0, lost a drive. My condolences on your loss. Next time, please consider RAID 5. So total loss, very bad news. All right, RAID 1, disk mirroring. We have that increased fault tolerance. Woohoo. One drive fails. We have an exact replica of it already in place. We pull out the failed drive, replace it with a new failed drive, and we should be able to resync the drives and still be okay. Only downfalls if we lost both drives. Be exceedingly rare. That would be like a lightning strike or something like that, and we didn't have a surge protector or something. But it would be improbable for two drives to fail at the exact same time. RAID 5, striping with parity. Single drive failure means your data will basically be fine. It just needs to be reconstructed. And so we would put it back in, resync it. It will reconstruct the missing data, and we should be okay. If we lose two drives, my condolences for your loss. Maybe we'll consider RAID 6, which RAID 6 is the new popular one because it is essentially RAID 5 with an extra drive for a second parity bit. You actually have two parity drives. All right, RAID 1+0 or 0+1, mirrored and striped. You lose a single drive, no matter what, you're okay. Replace the drive, resync, boom, good to go. If we lose 2 drives and it's a 4-drive operation, depends on the drives. But we can lose up to 2, so long as we don't lose 2 of the same type. Questions so far?
The drives are hot swappable because of the SATA cables, right?
Yes, so they are hot swappable. In a RAID, hardware RAID unit, it's almost like a toaster. You know, like you're pushing a button and it ejects the drive, and then you pop another drive in, and it starts resyncing those drives for you. You may, for some of them, you may have to shut them down first, and then it'll resync. Some of them can resync while the drives are hot. If it's a RAID 5, you're gonna have to shut down because it has to reconstruct the data. But like a mirror drive, those can typically be synced while hot. All right, optical drives. Almost all the issues you have with optical drives have to do with the media you are using. So the CD, the DVD, the Blu-ray, whatever, it's got smudges, scratches, scrapes, chips, what have you. And they have these disc repair kits that you can get pretty inexpensively that'll polish the DVD or the Blu-ray or the CD and generally render them useful again. And if there are smudges on it, don't use your t-shirt. Use like a microfiber cloth or something like that, or it's like the same type of cloth you would use for your glasses. You don't clean your glasses on your t-shirt either. But these car polish has a very, very minor abrasive that actually works pretty good. Clay bar, you know, those little like the clay bars that they use to polish cars, those work awesome on glass. And CDs and stuff like that. Most people only think of them with regards to paint, but no, like windshields and stuff like that, use them on there, they become invisible. But CDs as well, it's that minor abrasive. It's not too harsh. You can clean it up. If it's unusable before, it's kind of one of those things like, might as well take a chance. But some of those disc cleaner kits, I've seen CDs where it looked like they were dragged down the sidewalk, just gouged and scraped and chipped up. One of the warehouses I worked at, the other section of the warehouse from where I worked, did Walmart returns. All sorts of fun stuff came in there. But on occasion, we'd get boxes of DVDs without cases. And they were like, does anybody want to look through these before we throw them away? And people are looking, they're like, oh, they're chipped, they're scraped. No, I don't want them. And I'm sitting there going through and just like, I'll just take that one, I'll take that one, I'll take that one, I'll take that one, I'll take that one. Walk away. I bought a $5 disc repair kit. Run it through there really quick, all of them work. Still have many of them to this day. So,
That's a steal.
Yeah, no kidding, for free. And I think I walked out of there with like 30 or 40 DVDs. Yeah, GameStop, loved them, 5 for 10 or 3 for 10s. You know, not Best Buy. What was it?
Blockbuster.
Hmm?
Are you looking for Blockbuster?
You know, this place right here. I used to get 3 for 10, 5 for 20s, stock up your movies. Sometimes they came scratched up and you had to repair them. That's where those like repair kits just came in. Super awesome. You can buy super cheap stuff, get them used. Works for software too. So main point here. It works for software too. If the drive is not being recognized or not even trying, it's typically a connection issue. Go in, check your power, check your SATAs, and usually you can get it back up and running just by reseating the connection. Remember, cables have 2 sides. So, but it's usually, the vast majority of the time, the problem is with the disk itself. when you're dealing with opticals because they tend to be so sensitive about it. Although there are cases where the little laser piece can get dirty, especially if you have children. They like sticking their fingers down into stuff. I'm like, ooh, how does this work? And it doesn't quite do really well for a lens. Yeah, trades, movie sales, and games. Absolutely. We used to have Movie Stop, but I think they went out and GameStop still hangs around. But GameStop's real hit or miss. I do miss Blockbuster, man. That was like one of my favorite places. Especially when I was a poor college student, man. $10 would go a long way getting extra DVDs. All right. Video issues. Video, thankfully, very straightforward. So, either you have no video or bad video. What's going on, George?
You're not sharing your screen.
Yourself? Yeah, I heard about that, Justin. Netflix is going to stop doing the DVD stuff.
Kelly, you're not sharing your screen.
I'm not? Okay.
Thank you.
Poor shame. Yeah, George, your audio was garbled. I couldn't make it out. Sorry.
It's probably these AirPods. Thanks.
So here we go. Video issues. Either you have no video or bad video. Usually what it comes down to. If that's the case, essentially either the video card, which can happen, or the monitor projector display is to blame in that case. But a lot of this comes down to connectivity issues as well. I can't tell you how many times people say my monitor doesn't work, my monitor doesn't work, my monitor doesn't work, and it's not plugged in. Or my personal favorite, everybody's used to not turning off their monitors anymore. So they just walk away and the monitor goes to sleep. And they come back and they turn their computer on. And the computer turns on, but they get no picture. Because somebody turned off a monitor or there was a power flash and then the monitor was now off. And so they'll sit there and restart their computer 20 times. Why isn't it coming up on my monitor? Da, 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 da. I'll call IT. Well, are you sure it's turned on? Yeah, of course it's on. I never turned it off. We'll try hitting the power button. And you go and hit the power button and boom, fixed. That one happens way more than we'd like to admit. Less so on all-in-ones, more so on like the separate units where you have the case, the tower or whatever, and the monitor separate. All right. Good troubleshooting steps. Always check your cables, make sure everything's on. Try transferring, swapping out monitors real quick and see if it's an actual monitor issue. So if you switch from one monitor to the next and it's still giving you problems, then you know it's probably something internal like a video card or something like that. And if it's if you've installed a video card, maybe the video card's not getting power, maybe the video card is bad, one of those things, then you can go boot into Windows Safe mode. The video card won't be active and you can operate off of the graphics card on the computer and see if you can troubleshoot what's going on. It may be an updated driver, a variety of things, chip creep over time. The video card is kind of shimmied out of position. It doesn't have a solid connection anymore. So always try to check these things out. The other one would be like if it's on a laptop and this person goes and hooks up to a monitor and the monitor is not working or their display is not working, they were probably toggling between monitors either at their house or maybe they were giving a presentation and they toggled to the display monitor for the presentation and turned off theirs, or something along those lines where they toggled it back and then when they hook up when they get back to their desk, it's not toggled back to the other monitor, so they forgot. They seem to think that the monitor itself is to blame, but it's actually the settings for the monitor that are causing the problem. And there's usually a hotkey on a keyboard, usually in the upper right-hand side. One of the function keys you would use, and that would toggle between either having the monitor on the laptop on, the monitor on the external display, or both. All right, no image on the screen. Yeah, we just talked about this. Boot the system, see if you can get to the BIOS. If the BIOS does not show, then the problem is essentially with the display unit, especially if it's on something like a laptop. If it goes blank before or during the Windows splash screen, it's typically a Windows issue. So if you see it start to boot up and then it goes dark, it's typically a Windows issue. Boot into VGA mode or safe mode, and then reset the resolution, reinstall your video drivers and all that stuff. So booting to safe mode basically means you just have basic drivers running, but it allows you to troubleshoot, update drivers, and fix common problems. And then you can turn drivers back on one at a time and make sure they're working. Monitor keeps shutting down. This was a little bit more common with the old CRT monitors. They would get hot and then shut off. LCDs, it's rare, but it does still happen, especially if you're in a warmer environment. Computers are like us, they like cooler environments. In fact, they tend to like it 10 degrees cooler than we do. So humans tend to like it around 72. That tends to be the common consensus or the average. But computers tend to like it in the lower 60s. That's much more comfortable for them. All right. If this is happening and you don't have a hot environment, it's just a standard environment, check the venting on the back of the monitors. Monitors have cooling systems too, much like computers. So see if there's any dust or debris clogging it. It does happen. But if you do have it, clear it so that the system can cool properly, and that'll tend to fix your problem. Questions? All right, dead pixels. What do we do? I don't even need to go over this one. What do we do? You guys forgot already?
With it, or you send it back.
What was it?
You keep your piece with it, or you send it back.
So if it's under warranty, we send it in. If not, we can either replace it or deal with it. Sometimes we have burn-in, and it's a similar deal with burn-in. So if we have it, we're like, you know, like an icon on our screen or something like that. It's pretty common on TVs. Or if you're watching a particular channel more than others, like ESPN or something like that, the little ESPN logo will be burned into your screen. Even if you change channels, it's still there. And that's the same deal with the dead pixels or what have you. We can either send it back if it's under warranty, replace it, or deal with it. Incorrect colors, typically a monitor issue. Or it could be a color setting issue. Remember the story we talked about with UPS, where they were hot seating a employee in with on night shift in a desk with somebody who worked days, and the day shift person kept calling IT saying that their colors were off, and then they would swap monitors, and then the next day the same problem would be occurring. And what it was the person working night shift was partially colorblind, and so they had to change the color palette of the monitor so that they could actually see what was on the screen. So this could be a color settings, it could be a monitor setting, but just something to double check. But if you have parts of the monitor going bad, like the red spectrum is not showing, then it could be just a bad monitor issue. Dim or flickering images, this is typically a backlight issue, so you won't see this really with OLEDs. But if you have the matrix backlights, it could cause a problem if it goes bad. You'll have very, very dark, but you can still see the images are there, but they're almost too dark to read or whatnot. If you have flickering, we have to remember that LCDs do not flicker. They're either on or off. And if we have flickering issues, it is likely a CCFL and the bulb itself is going bad. And we can either upgrade to an LCD or an LED, excuse me, or swap out the bulb. Distorted images. This used to happen all the time with CRT monitors. If they were near any kind of motor device, like a fan on your desk, which people commonly had, or speakers to listen to music, these could cause waves in the picture. My personal favorite were the side mounted speakers would cause like green blobs to be on the monitors and stuff like that. And you would have to degauze or remagnetize the monitor, and that would correct the issue on the screen. This is not as prominent nowadays, but if you start to experience it, try to eliminate external interference first, like desk fans, anything that's gonna have a magnet in it, motors, any of that stuff kind of running very close to the monitor might affect the way it's seen. And then if you can eliminate any externals, check the drivers on the video card. And then after that, if both of those things seem to be okay and you're still getting the distortion, then it's time to replace the monitor. Rubbing the pixel. I'm gonna have to see that one. Trying to comfort the pixel and be like, turn back on, please. Please come back. I don't know. I don't know where that comes from. Maybe you can send me the page number on that one, Justin, and I'll take a look at it. All right. Other issues. Distorted geometry. Again, this is a CRT issue. This is more in the 4:3 aspect ratio, and what it is it's basically they're squishing things to make it fit your screen. For those of you youngins, when we were converting from these squarish CRTs to the widescreen LEDs or LCDs, you had one of two issues when you would turn on your screen. Either you had the squarish one and it was filmed for the widescreen and everybody looked really thin and tall, or you had older shows like filmed in the 80s and 90s or something like that, and then you'd put it on the widescreen and everybody looked stretched out. So, and that would give you like what was called a distorted geometry. And then what you would have to do is just choose a different resolution on the TV. So on the square TVs, the CRTs, you would get black bars on the top of the TV so that you could have that widescreen appearance, and the picture would look more normal. And then on the widescreen TVs, you'd have the black bars along the side, so you'd have more of a square TV aspect ratio. So you just have to change it. Most TVs nowadays, this can be set automatically. So you can set it to whatever you want, and then they have an auto select. So depending on what type of media you're using or what type of video you're watching, it'll auto change to what would be the best fit for that TV. Okay, I didn't know that. All right. So oversized images and icons, this has to do with the resolution. So if you're running at a lower resolution than your monitor can actually handle, the icons look bigger and tend to look very oldish. Which no matter what monitor we are looking on, what is the resolution we should use?
Native.
Native. Very good. If we set it to something other than that, it's going to be operating outside of its parameters. So that's when we can start to see oversized icons and images and stuff like that because of our resolution not being set to native. So memory on the video card can also cause other graphics issues where you're seeing you're running fine and then it kind of like blacks out when you start getting into graphics heavy programs like games and stuff like that. If you try to run it frames per second faster than it's supposed to run, or even at its maximum potential, you can run out of memory really quickly, and then the card itself will start to fail. So that's something to take into account. So the memory issues, though, with the cards, unfortunately, kind of directly correlate to how they work. And it's not something we can really swap out because, unfortunately, they don't give us extra slots on memory cards, to my knowledge, where we can add extra memory if we're having problems with them. So that would be a case of us being able to update it if we wanted to. So we'd have to replace the card or use the onboard graphics, which typically would be worse than what we installed. Oh my goodness, questions. Always questions. Only two. We'll resume recording. Here we go. Printers. Oh my gosh, you guys have missed this. It's been what, 24 hours since we talked about printers? Right, not even. It's like 5 hours since we talked about printers. So we're going to get into some different types of printers. And, you know, they work obviously in different ways. We kind of talked about that a lot this morning. And the problems often depend on the type of printer we're using. And so will our solutions. So we're going to break down on these three common types: impact, inkjet, and laser. So impact printers, again, they have their name because of the physical impact, you know, to transfer an image from the printer itself to the page, generally by impacting the paper through an ink ribbon. Thankfully, these are relatively simple devices, and there are only a few typical problems that we come up with. So one is like low print quality. And it is basically when the page comes out of the printer, characters are too light or have dots missing in them. That is what we refer to as low print quality. The printout jams inside the printer. This is forever a problem with the dot matrix, which is why mine, I tried to turn it into a drone, but it was incapable of flying. So a lot of this comes to common obstructions inside there. A piece of the perforation or the track paper gets jammed in there and causes the paper to kind of migrate off path. Once it migrates off path, it starts to crumple up. It becomes a whole big mess. Also, the tracks themselves can come out of alignment. So over time, it slowly works one page up over the other and just causes big problems all the way around. Once this is done, you typically have to stop what you're doing, remove the jam, check for any other debris in there, refeed, restart. Stepper motor problems. This is the motor will cause, you'll lose precision and it'll kind of move further with each step. So you'll see gaps in the letters, or one side will move further than the other, stuff like that. Here are our common impact printer problems. I highly encourage you, please, please, please take a screenshot of this for study, because this breaks it down real quick and easy. While you're doing that, we'll just kind of go over them real quick. Consistently faded or light characters. This is a worn out printer ribbon. So you can either try to advance it, see if you have any more. If there's not any more ink, it needs to be replaced. If the ink is just fine or the printer ribbon is just fine, you can try to move the platen or print head closer to the page, because it may be that it is adjusted further away and it's barely touching the page versus having better impact. Next, print lines that go from dark to light as the print head moves across the page. And this has to do with the printer ribbon advance gear. So the gear inside the ribbon itself is slipping, and you typically just replace the ribbon or the advanced gear mechanism that's in the printer itself. Small black line running through the line of the print. Talked about this one this morning. It has a print head pin that is stuck, pointed out, like the piston is fired, but it's not retracting. You can't just push it back in. It's not going to work. So at that point, the print head itself needs to be replaced. Thankfully, they're relatively inexpensive. Small blank line running through the line of print. This is a broken, loose, or shorting print head, so it's not firing at all, as opposed to one that fired and won't retract. This is one that's just not firing at all. And again, either make sure your cables are secure, because it could be it's not getting a signal on that pin in the serial cable, or the print head itself is not firing and needs to be replaced. All right. Printer missing a, what was it? Printer making a printing noise, but no print is appearing on the page. This is typically a worn out or empty ink ribbon. Or possibly does happen, the ink ribbon itself was installed improperly. So it's not fully in, so the head is hitting below the ribbon and not actually in the ribbon. So it probably needs to be seated better in the impact printer. And then finally, the printer is printing garbage, such as garbled characters. And we all know what this is. It's either a driver, or actually in the case of this printer, it could be the cable is not fully installed. But it also could be a bad control board. That's the impact printer. More questions. 3 this time. You have a higher probability of the pinholes or whatnot being clogged. Also, if you print like I do once a year, same problem. The ink can dry out in those little pinholes and cause issues with the quality of the prints. So you're left with the, trying to clean them first, and if the cleaning doesn't work, replace the cartridge. Color output problems. Savannah, can you read for us, please? In the sunflower fields.
First, ink could be bleeding from adjacent areas of the picture, causing the color to be off. A leaking cartridge can cause this, as can using the wrong type of paper for your printer. Our second potential problem, the ink cartridges are installed in the wrong spot. This is for printers with multiple color ink cartridges. That should be easy to check. Obviously, if that's the problem, put the color cartridges where they're supposed to be. Third, if the ink that comes out of the cartridge doesn't match the label on the cartridge, try the self-cleaning utility. If that doesn't help, replace the cartridge. Finally, if one of the colors doesn't come out at all and self-cleaning doesn't help, just replace the cartridge.
Excellent. Thank you. So it seems like, goodness, how can you possibly put them in the wrong spots? Well, there's a couple different types of ink cartridges with regards to inkjet printers. Like they have the all-in-one cartridges where you have the black, the cyan, the magenta, and the yellow all in one. And it's just one big block and you plug it in. Seems great, but the problem is if you use one color more than the others, you have to buy a whole new cartridge each time. So you're wasting more money that way. More of them now break it up where you have like a black cartridge and you have your 3 color cartridges. The black cartridge tends to be a bit thicker because we tend to use that ink a lot more. And then the color cartridges all happen to be the same size. And sometimes it's a tight space where you're trying to get those cartridges to fit in there. So it's very easy to kind of flip one cartridge into another slot. So double check it, make sure, before we go throwing a cartridge away and putting a new one in there. Paper jams. Majid, can you read for us about paper jams, please?
Paper jams. Inkjet printers have pretty simple paper paths, so paper jams due to obstructions obstructions are less likely than they are on impact printers. They are still possible, however, so an obstruction shouldn't be overlooked as a possible cause of jamming. Paper jam is in inkjet printers are usually due to one of two things: a warm pickup roller, sorry, and the wrong type of paper.
There you go. So over time, these pickup rollers get worn out. They get worn out, they'll grab more than one sheet at a time. More than one sheet at a time equals jam. Happens. What's another reason why it would pick up more than one sheet? It's not listed here. More of a problem in Florida.
Humidity.
Humidity. Humidity. Hot's not the issue. The amount of moisture in the air is. So it gets too humid, paper swells, starts to stick together. So humidity can be an issue. Wrong type of paper. If we are using resume paper and it's calibrated for the resume paper and it's much thicker, like cardstock almost, and then we switch to standard office paper, it's going to grab more than one because it's used to grabbing those thicker weight papers. So we just got to double check these things and should be able to solve the problem relatively easy. If it's a warm pickup roller, we got to buy a maintenance kit. They tend to be relatively inexpensive. For a small inkjet, maybe 15, 20 bucks. Paper feeding problems. Let's see here. Tutoria, can you read for us, please?
You will normally see one of two paper feeding options on an inkjet printer. Regardless of the feed style, the printer will have a paper feed mechanism which picks up the paper and feeds it into the printer. Inside the paper feed mechanism are pickup rollers, which are small rubber rollers that rub up against the paper and feed it into the printer. They press up against the small rubber or cork patches known as separator pads. These help to keep the rest of the paper in the tray, so that only one sheet is picked up at a time.
Thank you. So yeah, we just talked about this as they get they get worn, the rollers get smaller, and more than one sheet will get grabbed at a time. All right, stepper motor problems, just like impact printers. The failing stepper motor will have the same results, unevenly spaced lines on your page. Just like before, talk about our laser printers. So we went over this just this morning. The 7-step process is called the electrophotographic process, imaging process, or EP. And of all the printers that we talk about, that tends to be the more complex, which is why we have to talk about all 7 steps. And hopefully we remember our acronyms from yesterday. Please come every day to feel complete, or printers can't even do the effing cleaning. And we'll see which one y'all remember on Monday. All right. Laser printer problems. So we have a variety that we can deal with laser printers. They tend to be extremely complex, but thankfully the problems they tend to run into are relatively easy to identify. And some of the common ones, like power problems, doesn't respond normally. And there could be essentially a problem with what type of power it's receiving. You can use a multimeter to check the plug to make sure you're getting the proper amount of power. But as we all know, we don't mess with high voltage power supplies, right? So what do we do with those? We even think there's a problem with power supply. Field replaceable unit, right? All right, no connectivity or IP issues. So network printers, it's just like a computer. If it's getting on the network, it has to have an IP address, it has to have a MAC address, it has to be able to communicate with the DHCP server, all that fun stuff. Now, it's a little bit different, but we can manually configure the IP, or it can go to the DHCP. If we manually configure it, we can set it to static, and then we would go to our DHCP and reserve that IP for our printer so it never changes. If we're not able to connect to it, one of the first things we should do is try to ping it. See if we can actually have a basic level communication. Make sure our IP is correct. Stuff like that. Other issues, nothing prints. So we check the basics. Is it plugged in? Is it turned on? Is it online? You know, we start with our connections first and we build from there. Paper jams, unfortunately, are horribly common on laser printers. I don't know what it is about them. They get jammed up all the time. So they run at copier speeds, you know, so the jams are extremely common. The smallest piece of debris in there can cause the paper to just jam up. You turn into an accordion and just crunch up inside there. You know, the paper feed rollers, you know, many issues for this could be paper feed rollers getting worn out. You know, same like the pickup rollers in the inkjet. And the solutions tend to be, you know, kind of easy. If it's a worn pickup roller, it needs a maintenance kit, replace the rollers. If it has worn or broken gears, typically if they're a common piece that wears or breaks down, that can be swapped out in the maintenance kit as well. The other thing is if you do have a paper jam and you have to remove the paper, please make sure you get all of it. Otherwise, that microscopic piece of paper that you missed is going to be the bane of your existence for the next month or two until you find it, because it's going to continually jam after that. Thankfully, most laser printers, if you do get a jam, will tell you exactly where the jam occurred, and they have multiple doors, so you only have to open the section where the jam is located. Blank pages. Toner isn't being put on the paper. So this could be the toner cartridge itself, either empty, low, or somebody forgot to take the cover off of it. Does happen. The transfer corona, so it's not putting that positive charge on the paper to attract the toner from the drum to the page, or the power supply is not getting the corona charged enough to be able to charge the paper to attract it. So we'd have to kind of diagnose these one at a time. First, easiest thing to do, pull the toner cartridge out, rock it back and forth, put it back in, see if it starts to print, or replace the cartridge, and then we can move to the more invasive issues of transfer corona not working and or high voltage power supply not functioning properly. Questions on this?
What do you suggest first? Like the power voltage supply or the corona, the corona itself?
I mean, I might use a multimeter just to test and see if I'm getting power out of the power supply. It's like I'm not going to open the power supply, but I may use a multimeter just to see if I'm getting any kind of draw off of it. And if that's the case, then I would go for the transfer corona.
The power supply is supposed to charge it to positive 600 volts, right? So when you test it, are you going to get that amount?
I'm not sure what the output on the transfer corona would be, but I would imagine it would be something along those lines. But it's not really the voltage that is the threat, right? The amperage. We can swim in an ocean of voltage. Like when you shock your finger on a door handle in the middle of winter, if you see that spark, that's 10,000 volts. So the voltage isn't really the issue. But yeah, that's something we would double check. All right, all black pages. This is awesome because that's just like money being thrown out the window with your toner. This happens when the charging unit or the charging corona wire is malfunctioning and fails to actually place a charge, that negative charge in the EP drum. So when it goes by the The toner, it picks up all the toner. And then the Corona transfers it to the page, and then it gets cooked in. So all right. See here. Repetitive small marks or defects. This could be spilled toner on one of the rollers, vertical black lines. This could be a damaged drum or a dirty Corona wire. If it has like dust on it, it cannot charge that one specific spot where the dust is located. So you'll get vertical black lines on your paper. Image smudging, it means your fuser is not working properly. So it's not getting to the proper temperature. So it's either the settings are wrong because you're using a thicker paper, or the fuser itself is dying. Ghosting is when you see fake images of previously printed content or, information. So this could either be a broken cleaning blade, so it's not truly scraping the stuff off of it, or the erasure lamp itself is bad, so it's not getting bright enough to actually erase the previous image before it moves into the charging phase. Printer prints garbage, printer drivers, or the board itself is bad, the formatter board, but it's typically a printer driver if it's printing out random symbols and stuff like that. What we got here? One question, that's all.
Thank you.
Not a problem. Thank you for letting me know. All right. So other command line utilities we might want to mess around with while we're troubleshooting. An oldie but a goodie, and always a fun one to work with, is the ping command. So the ping sends some short little packets to whatever we direct it to, and then waits for them to come back. If they come back, it records how many were sent, how many were received, and how long it took for that exchange to take place, usually measured in milliseconds. These little packets are called ICMP, which is Internet Control Message Protocol. And these are echo requests. And so they're expecting you to send a ping. Once the ping is hit, then they send a ping back and lets you know, and then it lets you know what was received, what came back, and how long it took. So very powerful troubleshooting tool. And typically you want to start internally and then work your way out. So the first thing I want to ping is my loopback address. So I'll ping space 127.0.0.1 and see, do I get a response? I get a response. Awesome. Next, I'm going to ping my gateway. So I go ahead, I ping my gateway. Boom, I get a response. Awesome. Then I ping Google. I get nothing. I think, let me try something else. Then I ping 8.8.8.8 and I get a response. What's my problem?
DNS,
Why do you say that, Brandon?
because it's pinging the IP, not the address or the domain name.
Yeah, you're correct. So I'm able to get to the actual IP address, but I'm not able to get to the FQDN, or the fully qualified domain name. And so that's what the ping will help us with, and that it helps us diagnose the problems and where they're occurring. No, you wouldn't do just ping gateway, Brandon. You would say, you would use when we do our IP config, we get our gateway's IP address, right? So we would do a ping space and then the gateway IP.
Is the command to ipconfig different on a Mac? And when I
Yes,
try it,
yes,
I
it
get
absolutely
something
is.
different.
On a Mac and on Linux, it is IF config. So Igloo Foxtrot, not, Igloo Papa.
These ICMP packets will always be 4, or they will be more than 4.
It's typically 4. You can do, there's like an argument you can add to the ping command to have it continually send packets until you tell it to stop. And that is typically referred to as the ping of death, because it will quite literally keep going until you tell it to stop.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, it's typically 4. It's just an economical send. Not all routers are going to respond to a ping command because they can be used in DDoS attacks. So many routers actually turn this off. So just because you can't reach that one, maybe try another and see if you can reach it. And that is the ping command. I highly encourage you to practice this one. This one is pretty harmless. Good one to use on your computer. Try pinging your loopback address. Try pinging your router at your house just to see if you can kind of maneuver it kind of easily. All right, ipconfig. Or on a Mac or Linux, they use ifconfig. You can see it right here. Andrew. IWconfig is for your wireless routers or your wireless cards. But they all kind of do the same thing. So ipconfig, used to determine your network settings, and we have a few arguments that we do need to know. Or switches. And one is /all, so ipconfig space /all. This shows your full configuration information for your computer. This will be all your wireless, wired, IP version 6, IP version 8, or 4, excuse me, IP version 6, IP version 4. All the settings for all the network cards that you have and configurations you use. So that's going to be far more detailed than just the straight ipconfig. Then we go down to the bottom. If we're having issues with our DNS server where, the names we're putting in are not quite where they're sending us, like I type in www.google.com and it sends me to Yahoo. Things like this can happen. It's usually through some form of malware, and it is a DNS poisoning, but usually you can reset it and you can get around these things. So you would do ipconfig space /flush DNS. PlayStation users have probably used this in the past when they have difficulty connecting to servers. Any kind of online gamer with regards to not consoles, but computers, you've likely had to do this before as well, so that you can connect to servers easier. So that's flush DNS. Basically, it's erasing it and then re-requesting the data one website at a time. So it slows things down a little bit, but it gives you more up-to-date information. Then we have the ones in the middle. So we have the ipconfig /release. Now, if you have an issue where you have intermittent connection issues and you suspect that there's somebody else on the network with that same IP address, this is when this comes in handy. Or if you have, an PIPA address and you think the router is now working properly and the DNS is working properly, you need to first give back your lease on the DHCP IP address. So you have to release it. So you do ipconfig space /release. And this gives the IP back to the DHCP server. Now for a IP version 6, all you have to do is add a 6 on the end of the command. So it's ipconfig space /release 6. And that gives you the IPv6 version of that same command. And after we've released our IP, now we have nothing. We need to request something. and that would be ipconfig/renew. And this would request a new IP address lease from the DHCP server. And then the same as with the release, add a 6 on the end of it for the IP version 6 version. So that's release and renew. Please, please, please remember, do these in the correct order. People get in a rush and they renew, then release. And then the last command you had was release, so you have no IP. Any questions on this?
When we close the static IP address, so first we will go for the release and then we will do the renew.
Yes.
Okay.
So release the old one and then request a new one.
Thank you.
Not a problem. Good. So IP config. All the fun stuff. Next, more commands coming. Trace route. So this one's kind of a fun one. If you have larger networks, this will help you kind of track down if you're having an issue with a particular router. Or if there's an issue, you know, somewhere along the path of where your packets are going, this would be where you would kind of figure that out. So you can set a trace route command and then put in an IP address or a web address or what have you, and then you send essentially a ping and it will trace every single router that that packet goes through on its way to the destination. So that's trace route. So this may be like, you know, I'm here in Jacksonville, Florida. So I would send one, it would go to my local ISP here in Jacksonville, then it would probably go to Atlanta. And, you know, if I'm going to California, then it would probably go to Dallas. And then from Dallas, it'd probably go to Phoenix, and then from Phoenix to LA. So those would be like the router jumps it would make to get out there. Like if I was trying to send a request to Google.
Can you repeat the flush DNS, please?
Oh, IP config //flush DNS. That's if you're getting bad information from your DNS server or outdated information from your DNS server. It's a way to just kind of like wipe the cache file free and then start requesting the information again.
Thank you.
Questions on traceroute? For years, I thought this was trace cert.
Would the timeouts just be where the routers are having issues?
Yeah.
Did you get that? Oh, okay.
Or they may not allow ICMP packets. So you won't get a response on it.
Gotcha.
Happens. But if it's internally on your network, like you're trying to go from, you know, IT to the HR department, and there's like 3 or 4 routers between the two of you. You do this, and then one router doesn't respond, and you know that's the router that's having the problem. So you can go there quickly and take care of that issue rather than going to each router and trying to see if you can figure out which one's causing you problems. All right, NetStat. This is basically a command to show you all network connections going on your machine at the moment. And it will also give you packet statistics, show you how many packets have been sent and received, numbers of errors, all that kind of fun stuff, what the status is on those protocols. So like, is there an established connection? Are they transmitting? Are they waiting, closed, what have you? So here's the thing. Over here, where we see our IP, which is 10.0.0.4, and we have this colon and then this other series of numbers. What are these other series of numbers?
The port.
Ports, right? So this is also a place we can go to kind of troubleshoot if we assume malware might be part of the problem. Because in order to bypass firewalls, a lot of malware have what are called phone home properties. So they get established on your computer and then they send pings back to the host. So that gives the host the ability to grab onto that ping, grab it, and write it back in through your firewall, bypassing the stateful configuration. So this is an interesting way to kind of go through. If you've hardened your system and turned off a lot of ports, and now all of a sudden those ports are being used, you got a problem. Questions on this? All right. Okay, NVT stat. This one does not really have a lot of practical use nowadays. However, it is a command that still exists. It's utilized on the old NET BIOS. Why we need to be aware of this is if ever you're being asked something that they're going to ask about for a NET stat. So if they're asking about this, I guarantee you this is going to be one of the answer choices. You know, this is used for strictly for NET BIOS name resolution. Not something we use very often nowadays, but you should be more than well enough aware of it to know that it is not NetStat. Kind of like SNMP. We don't really get into SNMP in A+, you do in Network+, but we need to know enough to know not to select it when they're asking for SMTP, send mail to people, simple mail transmission protocol. Questions on NVT stat? More commands. Okay. Net command. So, depending on your Windows version you're using, it is a very powerful command you can use. Net allows you to do a lot of things that you want that you would typically do in the operating system. So, like net user allows you to add, delete, and see information about users. Net time, you can set the time to that of another computer. And this is important when you're dealing with networks and stuff like that. All of them need to be operating on the same time. So when events occur, you're able to trace back when and where they occurred first. Net file, close and open files, all that kind of fun stuff. I highly encourage you to take a screenshot of this so that you have it as a quick reference if you need for your studies. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, revelations? All right. Last command, NS lookup. This enables you to verify entries on a DNS server. So we'd use NS lookup. We could use a web address or an IP, and it would tell us the corresponding web address or IP. So if I put in www.google.com, it would come back with 8.8.8.8, which is actually Google's DNS server. So this allows us to look those things up. So if we have a website that we want to use as a test, you know, we can go find that website, get its IP, and then we could test both of them if we wish. So that is the NS lookup. Questions, comments, concerns? All right. Any questions? It's about a handful of commands, but you do get a chance to practice them. Both test out and Coursera. Some of them, yes, Kylie. So you need to see them in multiple choice, but yes, it's these basic commands, netstat, NS lookup, ping, IP config. We would need to be able to use them in basic terms for the A+ for performance-based questions.
How many of those do you get on the test, by the way?
What, performance-based questions?
Yeah.
Few as 1, as many as 6 is the most I've heard.
Okay.
And what they do is they adjust your overall questions because of it. So if you receive, you know, you'll know right off the bat when you open up your test and you see like 70 questions, you're going to have a lot of performance-based questions. If you see like 85, you're probably not going to have many. So the more questions you, because each of the performance-based is worth multiple questions, and you do get partial credit for them. So. All right. Is that it? Any other questions? Don't look so stressed, George. It's not that bad, I
Me
promise.
first want to know about like how the commands interact with the Mac and Linux, because this is what I use more personally. So I want to know about that.
So the Linux commands, they kind of have their own. There are some crossover, like the ping works and stuff like that, but Linux and Mac kind of have their own command line system that they use. If you go back to the other operating systems where we talked about Linux and stuff like that, those get into the commands that you really need to be aware of with regards to the exam. And if you pay attention for the Linux labs as you go through Coursera, those translate into Mac very easily because they operate off similar command lines. All right, well,